Good evening and welcome everyone to another edition of Friday with Friends. Today's friend, a brand new friend, Irene Miller. Hi, Irene.
Hi, how are you, Craig?
It's good. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, we don't know anything about each other, but look, just in 1 hour what we learned.
That's right.
Yeah.
Irene and I just met about an hour ago and we're already good friends. And so it's a real chit chat tonight, just getting to know each other, which is really the whole basis of these talks is getting to know someone in a real way. And maybe we can get there and you can observe us doing that. The title that might come for this is Healing Through Compassion. And the way I came up with that one is that in my chat with Irene, I learned that she was a clinical psychotherapist. And one of her main ways of sharing or healing was not so well. I'll let her say that. So she's from the Boston area. She's been practicing Raj Yoga for probably over 30 years?
Yep.
Right about
1992.
1992. So let's get on with it. So Irene, first question. When you hear the term healing with compassion, what comes to the forefront of your mind?
I don't think it can happen any other way. Because if the person that's the client doesn't feel safe and given full attention for whatever it is they're saying without having to ask too many questions or correct them or whatever like that. Would you feel that it should be a two-way conversation, but they're talking most of it, but sometimes I just need to get in there and just lay something on the table that I'm observing. But always not like I'm the expert, but I've observed this. I'm just noticing how every time this subject comes up, your whole body posture changes. Did you realize that? And they say, no, I didn't realize that. I don't know what it means. I'm not going to try to tell them that I think it means this, but just to observe that when certain stuff comes up, it affects the body, it affects the face, it affects the kind of things you say after.
So one of your skills that you've acquired or maybe you already had is the one of observation.
Yeah.
And when you're observing, are you trying to find out what's right or what's wrong, or are you just simply observing?
Well, at a certain point, you have to ask what brought you here. Or that kind of thing. I probably wouldn't say it like that, but somehow it's where you're sort of. But first, it's just whatever they come in with, like, oh, you know someone I know, or I used to go, I went to, whatever it is. Let them say it because that's their initial intro of themselves. I work in this kind of way, and your office looks as though you like paintings. And so I'd say, yeah, many things are not my paintings, because I shared space with others. I wouldn't say that. I would just say, yeah, I think I do. And then I'd say, this one, I'm not so sure, but this one I do. And just to kind of start so that they can get to know me a little bit too.
So
Just a little bit.
there's sharing involved.
Yeah.
Does that
So
help?
it's not all one-sided.
Does that help with the creating a safe place?
Yeah. Good time.
So really, maybe that's the first thing is you want a person to feel safe because they're going to, well, it kind of segues right into, it's more than just a professional thing, but in relationship with any other human being that you're running into, don't you want to create a safe place so that you could have a meaningful connection to that?
Thank you. Yeah. Yes, definitely. Yeah, it's the compassionate thing to do. It's like we've all had dings and bangs on our outside and on our inside, and so it's important.
is this something that you came by naturally, or has your practice of Raja Yoga influenced the way that you work and listen?
Absolutely. Oh, 1000%, I would say. Because where before I might have thought of this person in front of me as, a classic, I would never have even then used these terms, but still just to make it sound like some of the people that were in the same business as myself. A classic underachiever who I would be explaining to somebody else, and I would be using these terms. And I might be observing that, but I certainly wasn't going to feed it back to them. I would just, I might take a clue and say, what did you study? What did you really like when you studied this? And then they would say, well, I never followed it, but I really loved history and geography. I could realize I couldn't make a living doing that, so I had to get do other things. And then I could read that back in some other time as a way of using an illustration. Well, what if you were just use whatever they say, so that when I'm asking a question, it has part of them in it. It's not just like a clinical question where I've got my pad and so on and so forth and like that. More like whatever they are shining through, whatever small amount that their eyes light up when they talk about it. I don't want to just leave that on the side. I would make sure that came up some other way.
So you were actually paying attention,
yes,
as a human being,
yes.
So it's such a basic thing,
Yeah.
but yet you have to become an expert in order to do something that is so intuitive and basic, that all of our conversations should be filled with such, all of our interactions, as I've said to other guests here, is that every relationship has some importance to it. Even if it's the person that's putting groceries in the bag, you're having a connection that moment. And so to not to take it out of hand as inappropriate, but just to pay attention to that person at that moment.
And what I would do is I might say, thanks. The way you filled that bag, it's going to be easier for me to carry. An observation of
well, I put myself in that person's position, and I feel better that I've been validated, just through the simple recognition that I'm doing my job and you care enough.
And that you're doing your job well. Validate, I think it's a word that means it has to do with value, with that person has value. And there are plenty of people that are not used to having that feeling. But if they're good at what they do, or even if they're trying really hard and they're not good yet, I just observe them with eyes of compassion.
So you probably naturally always had this type of being. Now,
but Raj Yoga
that's what I want to know. Tell me how, now that the practice of Raj Yoga has influenced the way that not only you work, but you interact with human beings.
Well, how would I answer that? I would say, of course, but I want to give an example.
Maybe I could be more specific.
No, it's all right. I might help if you're more specific.
Is that a lot of times our interaction with people is we want something. It's an interaction of negotiating shared wants, and you compromise on something. But what I found in Raj Yoga is it's more of a benevolent, or an offering something. And how is the study of Raj Yoga influence your interaction with people, not only on a professional level, but on a person-to-person daily level, or maybe even with yourself? Maybe it starts there. How has your relationship in relating to yourself changed?
That's a good question. I was raised by critical, distant kind of parents, and there were five of us kids, my sister and myself, and then three brothers. And they were not. They didn't. Nobody talked about feelings except me, and I got scolded if I indicated that I had observed a feeling. You know, but anyway, so there I am with this group of human beings that I'm related to, and but feeling like there's no way to really talk. I didn't know. I'm a kid still. You know, I'm not old enough to have learned anything from outside the family. But I just felt like, why don't they notice that if my mother uses that tone of voice, why doesn't she notice that nobody wants to talk to her? You know, or that she, you know, we all go like that. You know, and maybe she did notice, but maybe she didn't care. She had to do it anyway, and she didn't know another way. But over time, we are so much affected by our family of origin. We're learning in spite of ourselves. Even once I knew that I would never. First of all, I decided I didn't want to have kids. I didn't want to get married because I didn't think I could do a good job. I could see how hard a job was. And I had started to have a lot of sympathy for them. But it wasn't going to help me to express that, but to observe that, you know, that there was a lot of uptightness about, you know, some situations and some health situations. My mother had a very bad patch of health that was scary for all of us, and so on like that. But what I mean is that there were times when no one else was saying anything, and I could tell that. Why aren't we asking how Mom's doing? Why aren't? What shouldn't we know? She had a big operation, and the parents and my grandparents were helping out a lot. Nobody wanted to talk about anything, and so I observed that we all. Like that, all right, then I want to ask, you know, and so my observation was that the effect of that was that we all shut down more, and nobody was talking about how scary it was. Maybe she might die, you know, she didn't die, she came out fine. But so there's this thing about the feelings are dangerous. Feelings are dangerous. You just don't, you know, that's it. I mean, that's our talk. Just like that. You know, I would go, zip it
Well, it's a protective mechanism.
for them and for me. Yeah.
And so I'm guessing that, you know, your nature was always one of having feelings, and just that influence you in the field that you chose to even go into is because of your situation.
Oh, yeah. And so what I learned from the wide variety of experiences available to me in that kind of a setting was that I could observe, but I didn't want to upset people. I didn't want to say, why is it the father doesn't come home sometimes? I wasn't going to say, nobody else said it, but I wasn't going to point out things or do give voice to something, because I really understood that there was already a lot of pain in the family, and I didn't want to inflict more pain. And that's part of compassion.
Is understanding. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's everything that you observe, you don't necessarily bring out. It's because you're holding the best interest of others in mind, which actually sounds like a therapist to me. That you're already set up for that.
I was. And my mother thought, how are you going to make a living in psychology? I mean, you have to be able to earn your own living. So she, which was very sensible. And I said, well, my choice before that was I wanted to study the history of languages, human languages, and she really,
No,
she really didn't think much of that.
that
So
psychology is much better.
compared to that, it was
Yes.
reasonable. Yeah. So yeah, but they wanted us each to proceed in a sensible way.
Well, it's something that you said about, you when you recognize maybe a patient would be a classic underachiever,
Mhm.
and then perhaps it was related to them not going with what they loved, and it's not so much underachieving, it's this not following their bliss, as
Yeah.
Joseph Campbell used to say,
Yeah.
to follow your bliss, where you were able to find the subject dear to your heart that was so meaningful to you,
Yeah.
which I'm sure you were very enthusiastic about your career.
I didn't. Yes, I was, but I didn't. I wasn't someone that was talking about it a lot. I wasn't saying,
I don't mean like that.
Yeah,
I
okay.
mean that by satisfied
Okay, so
with yourself, that you're not underachieving
mhm,
because you love what you're doing. You have value for what you're doing.
yeah,
And wouldn't you still say that you're still doing the same thing in every interaction that
yeah.
you have with other human beings?
But part of that came from Raja Yoga,
Tell me.
because what we learn is that it's not just what behavior or attitudes are visible in a group of human beings in front of me, or that I know, or that I whatever, that the history goes back way back. It's not just, you could say, well, he was raised in a poor neighborhood, so that must be it. But lifetime after lifetime, we are adding to our stock of information, and how we use it, and what, so on like that, is different for each person. So it became like it was a thoughtful. It added a lot of dimension to how I would see others, and
Well, like you mentioned, the word earlier that stuck with me is three-dimensional.
yeah,
Is that for textbooks, you want to answer, and then you want to have an answer, within a paragraph or a
Right.
page.
Right.
But this is so much more complex that you have, we're talking about consciousness.
Yeah.
And consciousness, what I ask people often is how long is consciousness? Is it temporary or eternal? And I've never heard anyone say temporary. Everyone has this innate instinct that their conscious, or who they are, or something about the soul, whatever you want to call it, is eternal. I've never heard anyone say anything any different than that, no matter what their religious belief. But that's so vast that it's hard to wrap your mind around that.
Yeah, definitely is. But also, so the aspect of sanskars.
And what are sanskars?
Sanskars are attitudes, habits of thinking, what the things that make us really happy and really upset, and how I interact with others. They're habits, but it's not
Deeper than that.
It's way deeper than that. But yeah,
Like what I might call my personality.
yeah,
Really.
yeah, my personality, and so the first part of that is person. I am a person. But most people think that they only have one life. They live one life. They're born, they live their life, and then they die. And then they either go to heaven or they go to hell, or something like that, however they do it. So that's pretty one-dimensional.
Well, it's really hard to wrap your mind around something else, because it's a lot of work to think about all that. So it's kind of frightening. I think it's the same as your family's talking about your family, that we don't talk about feelings because we can't bring up something that we don't know how to fix because that's even worse,
right,
is
right,
to bring it out in the open and not being able to deal with
right.
it.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it. So so Raj Yoga is a way of honoring the individual personality of each one of us. And that the personality, instead of calling it complex or, this, putting a word on it, say that the path of learning how to be one's best self, it takes many lifetimes. And we make mistakes, and some of the mistakes are hurtful for ourselves or other people.
Mm-hmm.
But that's how I and you have individual learning path.
How do you deal with on the moment of recognizing your own mistakes that may have hurt yourself or hurt other people? How has the study of Raj Yoga helped you to not shy away from that or defend?
I don't mean I've never defended. I mean, I think there's some,
Well, of course, but I mean that how do you?
You mean inside of me?
Yes.
Inside of it. There's this word forgiveness is such a word. I think that many of us that have been studying this deep and very useful and spiritually enlightening and enabling kind of way of living and seeing ourselves and interacting. I think that from talking with others in the same study, that we still are very hard on ourselves. That we've been shown, many examples. The teacher that you and I were talking about before was so clear and so bright. And I want to be that clear and that bright.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah. And then I want everything that I learned from Dadi Janki to be available to me and to others. And of course, it's not like that. It's situational, and it's a lot of factors.
And we all have our own difference. Have you recognized the beauty of your own path? That it's unique and wonderful.
Yeah.
It brought us here. Both of our paths have intersected to this moment, and there's a fruition that takes place, and that's joy.
Yeah.
So just that simple. It's like a vacation. The reason why people do all these things is to have this moment of unencumbered joy when it comes so spontaneously and easily, and sharing is involved. Oh, well, we could go on, and we do have a 20-minute time limit. And I'm sure we've already passed that up. Normal, and I didn't even clue you in on how this works. This is completely impromptu, by the way. We usually close with like a 2 or 3 minute commentary. Would you feel comfortable offering a meditation commentary for me and anyone who may be watching based upon the subject matter of today? Yeah. Okay.
I'm taking that this is an optimum moment for me to share a feeling of joy, which has increased greatly in my life as a Raj Yogi. I know that there are moments when we are too wound up to notice how special we are. Each one of us has so much of individuality and truth and goodness. Many are not in touch with that, but I'm talking about those of us that are watching a program like this, that are tuned in, that want to be part of that the evolution of our 21st century consciousness. And so want to invite you to take a deep breath. First, breathe in. And let that go. We'll do 3 breaths. And say yes. With the 3rd breath, breathe in love. And breathe out happiness. Breathe in love. However it feels to you, just take it in as a beautiful part of yourself that's activated in love. You're receiving love, you're giving love. Compassion is your daily way of appreciating. And so, after breathing in love, you're breathing out happiness to those around you. Look at yourself in the mirror with that happiness, because these are the gifts of love. To be able to hold a loving thought or feeling in your heart, and then to breathe it out as imagine that you're giving it to someone that needs it. So the potential of human beings to be givers, to be unselfish, joyful givers, is much greater than people think. So that's what Raja Yoga is for me, is that to give and receive, but always with that connection with God, with the highest source of compassion, love, happiness, and security, should I say. So may you always know that you are special. There's no one like you. And that what that means is that you are precious to God, because He knows all of us, and He can see our specialness. And He actually nurtures that in various ways, but that feeling that I am special. Give yourself that gift. I am special. I don't have to do anything to convince anybody else of it. I am special. Because God knows me as I am and loves me as I am. So this is the specialness that I offer to each of you as a gift.
Om Shanti to that. Thank you. That was very good. See, the spontaneous moments are wonderful things that come. They're unexpected gifts.
They are.
By being in the present.
Yep. By being in the present.
It's no mistake that the same word present is used for different things.
Yes.
It's all good. Thank you everyone for watching, and we'll see you again next time on Friday with Friends. Bye.
Bye.